This event is in webinar style, just in case you're wondering why you cannot see everyone else. Meaning we have panelists on the stage and we have attendees in the audience joining and watching. So please feel free to participate through the chats and through the Q&A. We have quite a packed agenda for today. We will have a few speeches, and after that, we'll delve into our panel discussion for today. And so please, we are really excited that you're here, and feel free to use the chat and the Q&A for any questions that you might have or any comments that you might have during this event. And so now we are going to quickly transition to the next item on the agenda, which is still me, giving you a warm welcome to the African Industrial Forum. Once again, like I said, my name is Professor Rose Margaret Ekenyitua, and I'm the founder of African Technology and Innovation Institutes. Distinguished guests, partners, industry leaders, policymakers, academics, innovators, and friends of Africa. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're calling from, and welcome to the inaugural African Industrial Forum, proudly organized by the African Technology and Innovation Institutes. I am deeply honored to be here today with you all, not just as a founder of this initiative, but also as an African committed to the promise of our continent's industrial and technological transformation. We gather here today at a pivotal moment in history when the tides of global industry are shifting once again in another industrial revolution. As the world transitions into the fourth and fifth industrial revolutions, we are presented with a singular opportunity to reimagine Africa's industry journey, to reimagine Africa's future, not just from the margins, but from the center, with agency, with innovation and determination as Africans and friends of Africa. Let me begin by reflecting on where we are now. Despite holding over 30% of the world's mineral resources, Africa contributes only about 1.9% to global manufacturing output. According to the African Development Bank, Africa's share of global industry GDP is still less than 3%, and manufacturing makes up just 10 to 12% of African countries' GDP. We remain primarily exporters of raw materials, while importing high-value finished goods, an unsustainable model that continues to deprive us on the continent of jobs, economic independence, and innovation leadership. However, the signs of evolution are clear. Across our continent, we are beginning to see homegrown innovations, emerging industries, emerging industrial zones, youth-driven tech ecosystems, and governments prioritizing industrial policy. Countries around the continent are showing that it is possible when we have coordinated action, infrastructure investment, and innovative leadership and digital integration to really be at the cutting edge of industrial innovation. But let us also not stop catching up as Africans. I think that this moment presents us an opportunity. And so today we must ask, can Africa lead the global transition to Industry 4.0 and beyond, to Industry 5.0? My answer, and our collective answer and challenge, is yes, we can. But we can only do so with intentionality and togetherness. Industry 4.0, which is characterized by automation, smart manufacturing, artificial intelligence, cyber-physical systems, is already reshaping production worldwide. Yet, according to the World Economic Forum, only 16% of African manufacturers are considering this shift. Worse all, the digital divide persists, with over 700 million Africans still lacking reliable internet access, a low level of digital skills across many industrial workforces. And so our challenge is clear. Now the world is ready to move into Industry 5.0, where human centricity, sustainability, climate resilience defines industrial progress. This next revolution asks us to go beyond efficiency and ask how industry can empower people, can empower our youth, protect the planet, and promote shared prosperity. For Africa, this is more than just a challenge. It is a call for us to define our path, rooted in our realities, our values, and our vast potential on the continent. Ladies and gentlemen, the African Industrial Forum, which we're all here today participating in, was born from a vision to connect visionaries, doers, disruptors who believe in the African capacity, not just to catch up, but to lead. Through African Technology and Innovation Institutes, we aim to build a Pan-African ecosystem of learning, innovation, and collaboration, linking academia, industry, and government in powerful, purpose-driven partnerships. Today is not just a forum, it is a movement. And so I invite every one of you here, whatever your job title, whatever ecosystem or vertical you work in, I invite everyone here to become a part of this journey. We need government, private sector, educators, young Africans, our diaspora, to all come together to ensure that we have this transformation. The time for talk has passed. The time for transformation is now. So let us commit to an Africa that manufactures what it consumes, exports what it innovates, and leads in industries of the future. Let us ensure that Africa is not left behind again in the fourth and the fifth industrial revolution. Together, we can build an Africa that is technologically empowered, economically independent, and industrially sovereign. Let this forum be the start of a new chapter, one written not for us, but by us. And may history remember that this moment, Africa rose, not to follow, but to lead in the Industrial Revolution. Thank you very much and welcome to the African Industrial Forum, and let us build a bright future for Africa together. Thank you. Thank you very much for that. And like I mentioned earlier, I have the honor of being the host for the event, wearing two hats at the same time. But now it gives me the greatest honor and pleasure to invite Ms. Umana, who is the gender expert for the United Nations Industrial Development Organization in Nigeria. She is representing the UNIDO Nigerian representative, Ambassador Philbert Abaka Johnson, who unfortunately could not be here with us, but he has sent the best representative ever, the amazing Ms. Umana, to give the opening remarks on his behalf. So please let us put our hands together and welcome Ms. Umana to the stage.
Thank you very much, Professor Rose Margaret. Thank you for your invitation. Greetings, everyone. I bring you warm greetings from our regional director, to Nigeria and ECOWAS, Ambassador Philbert Johnson, who was unavoidably absent. He really wanted to be here. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I'm delivering these opening remarks on his behalf. It is my honor to deliver the opening remarks at this 2025 African Industrial Forum. On behalf of the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, UNIDO, I extend my sincere gratitude to the founder and CEO of African Technology and Innovation Institute, ATII, for the invitation. This forum marks a significant step towards engaging in strategic dialogue on Africa's industrial future to catalyze the continent's drive towards achieving inclusive and sustainable industrial development, which is the major mandate of UNIDO. Ladies and gentlemen, Africa is regrettably struggling in the 21st century with industrialization, having been left behind in the first, second, and third industrial revolutions. Africa is not catching up fast with the rest of the world on industrial development. Within the context, deepening insecurity, poverty, and Africa's demographic bulge, it would be tragic if we are left behind again in the current wave of the fourth industrial revolution sweeping across the globe. Unlike the previous ones, the fourth industrial revolution, which involves smart manufacturing, automation, artificial intelligence, cloud computing, robotics, the Internet of Things, digitalization, autonomous vehicles, 3D printing, blockchain, and biotechnology, gives room for African countries to leapfrog and should not necessarily follow subsequently from first industrial revolution to the fourth. The deployment of digital technology has been at the forefront of industrial transition in recent years, simultaneously promising immense potential for increasing value added, productivity, and efficiency. Therefore, Africa has no alternative than to join the fourth industrial revolution train by being deliberate and strategic in taking the right steps. There is a need for a strategic dialogue on Africa's industrial future so that African countries can become major players in global value chains. By putting in place and implementing right policies and programs that serve to position them appropriately. There is also an urgent need to invest more in people, promote massive investment in digital technology and deployment in the manufacturing sector, upskill and retool workforce for technology-driven changes in the industrial sector. Ladies and gentlemen, UNIDO is a specialized agency of the United Nations that promotes and accelerates inclusive and sustainable industrial development in developing countries and economies in transition. The organization does this by pursuing intrinsically linked thematic priorities to advance economic competitiveness, strengthening knowledge and institution. UNIDO has a Directorate of Digitalization, Technology and Agribusiness, DTA, that promotes smart manufacturing in member states through technical cooperation. UNIDO's technical cooperation activities in Nigeria are currently articulated in the Program for Country Partnership, PCP. The PCP is a single approach for UNIDO's country-level programming to support Nigeria in achieving its long-term industrial development goals. Being mindful of the ongoing transition and quick evolvement of the fourth industrial revolution, the PCP has a component on startups and MSMEs development, innovation, science, technology, and digital economy. Ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, the time to act is now. To catalyze Africa's leadership and propel Africa to a new era of technological and economic leadership requires actionable industrial policies and cross-sectional collaborations involving high-level stakeholders, government, industry, academia, multilateral institutions, innovators to engage effectively to promote inclusive and sustainable industrial development. Once again, I commend the organizers, the founder and CEO of African Technology and Innovation Institute, for initiating this dialogue. I want to reiterate UNIDO's involvement in this year's summit, and I look forward to more collaborations with African Technology and Innovation Institute to promote inclusive and sustainable industrial development in Africa. Thank you and have a successful forum.
Thank you so much, Ms. Ememumana, for that really poignant opening remarks from Ambassador Philbert Abaka Johnson. So excellently said, and it's really great to hear about UNIDO's strategy to support industrialization on the continent. In particular, you mentioned PCP. I think that's a really great initiative. So thank you so much for that really thought-provoking and poignant opening remarks that has really set the stage for the conversation we will have today. Again, we're having the conversations to take action because the time for talking is over. It's time we actually take strategic and intentional actions regarding industrialization on the continent. So thank you so much once again, Mr. Memumana, for that. And thank you to Ambassador Philbert Abaka Johnson and UNIDO for that. If you're just joining, welcome to the African Industrial Forum. We're excited to have you here. I see a few more people have joined since we started. So please, we're going to now move on to the next item on our agenda, which is the keynote address by Mr. John Kamara. And we'll be playing the video from Mr. John Kamara because his flight got delayed and he's now airborne. He was meant to have arrived, but he's now airborne. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce Mr. John Kamara. So Mr. John Kamara is a renowned Pan-African tech entrepreneur with over 20 years of experience driving new market acquisitions across Europe, America, Asia, and Africa. He's a leading authority on leveraging emerging technologies for business transformations. John has successfully built and scaled ventures across sectors, including AI, fintech, health tech, agri-tech, education, and gaming. He's the founder and global CEO of Edanian Labs and the AI Center of Excellence for Africa. He's also CEO of Cortex Africa and a strategic leader at several organizations, including Machine Intelligence Institute of Africa, the Nelson Mandela African Institute of Science and Technology. Mr. Kamara's extensive portfolio includes founding and investing in companies like Afrimart, Afia Record, Tua, Pharma Agric. The list is endless. A former executive at global tech giants like Google, Sun Microsystems, Mr. Kamara deeply is passionate about using technologies like AI, IoT, blockchain, and crowdfunding to solve Africa's socioeconomic challenges and build sustainable ecosystems. As a sought-after thought leader, he has inspired audiences on global stages, including the AI Expo for Africa and the Africa FinTech Summit. Mr. Kamara has served as a mentor and dedicating his time to nurturing Africa's next generation of tech entrepreneurs. Please join me in welcoming virtually Mr. John Kamara. And we will now play this video.
Good day, everyone. My name is John Kamara. I am the founder for the AI Center of Excellence in Nairobi, and I'm excited to join you on this webinar where we're talking about Africa's future, shaping global industries through smart manufacturing, automation, and artificial intelligence. It is a fantastic opportunity and a pleasure to be here to speak to everyone about the possibilities and the opportunity that artificial intelligence. Good day, everyone. My name is John Kamara. I am the founder for the AI Center of Excellence in Nairobi, and I'm excited to join you on this webinar where we're talking about Africa's future, shaping global industries through smart manufacturing, automation, and artificial intelligence. It is a fantastic opportunity and a pleasure to be here to speak to everyone about the possibilities and the opportunity that artificial intelligence represents in our future. We are standing at the edge of a revolution that is not defined by borders, age, or traditional power, but by intelligence, connectivity, and by creation. A revolution that does not ask for permission. So I believe this is Africa's moment to shape global industries, not just to participate in them, but to architect them. The new frontier of smart manufacturing, automation, and artificial intelligence, we're not too late. We are just right in time. And a couple of things I want to talk about is why smart manufacturing matters to Africa. Let me be clear. Smart manufacturing is not about robotics replacing humans. It's about humans becoming smarter with robots and automation. It's also about humans becoming much better at research and development in smart manufacturing to create better products that are localized in our continent using our resources for the very first time. Building AI-powered factories that predict machines need servicing before they break down. Use case. Using digital twins to simulate production before single boat is turned. Use case. And also, when we think about leveraging real-time data to optimize raw material usage, to reduce waste, and to create new product lines, becomes an extremely important part of speeding up production, reducing the cost of production, and automating our production lines to increase the value we provide to customers. And what does this mean? This basically means that smart manufacturing is one of the fastest routes to, one, revenue generation, export-grade quality productions, sustainable job creation, and most importantly, we begin to create IPs that we can own. Number two, the role of automation in AI. My belief, the smart spine of a modern industry is how we automate using artificial intelligence in manufacturing and global industries. AI is not just a buzzword, and I think we must move away from all the buzzword and the hyper-accuses that we hear. It is a new electricity that is going to drive smart industry. It is a silent worker that never sleeps 24/7 for ports, for factories, for industries. And also, it is the worker that keeps learning to compensate and help us bridge the divide to make quality smart products in real time. In the manufacturing industry in Africa, for context, AI can optimize supply chains, which basically means we can predict much better logistics. We can identify flawed products in production timeline in real time through computer vision. We can train virtual assistants to guide workers in complex tasks and also to create new repair mechanisms and new knowledges for the maintenance culture that we lack. And more importantly, create automated audit systems to ensure our regulatory compliance. And this AI plus automation is the smart spine for our 21st century manufacturing that we need to build the spine of Africa's new DNA for manufacturing. The third thing I want to talk about is what we basically would then call connected networks and local intelligence. Now, building ecosystems, not silos. Smart systems don't work in isolation. We already know that. We've had this problem for years in the continent. They talk to each other. They learn from each other, and that is the difference between smart factory and a smart nation. Now, when we connect our industrial zones, our data lakes, our talent, our knowledge systems, we're creating connected clusters of smart factories across countries. We're building African cloud systems and infrastructure to support industrialization, and we're investing in cross-border AI innovation centers for manufacturing, which will be the core of how we use our mineral resources to drive value into our continent. And establishing, one of the important things I believe we should do is establish IP banks. So our innovations are patented, localized, protected, and monetized globally to give us a competitive Africa. Africa's untapped wealth and intellectual property is the next thing I would like to talk about. Now, for long, we have exported raw materials, imported finished products. That is the past because our future lies in developing AI-powered product design systems, using machine learning to test hundreds of product configurations faster than we've ever done before going to market, and turning African solutions into protected intellectual property. Our IP will become our new gold, and smart manufacturing will be our new refineries that drive fundamental growth in our manufacturing industry. This is something I am extremely, extremely passionate about. And what can we do today? That is a question we must ask ourselves. Practical actions our leaders, our entrepreneurs, and also our champions of industry can do. We need not wait any longer. We need to retrain people, reskill people, and use artificial intelligence in our manufacturing systems, AI engineers in manufacturing. We need to train young people, and we also need to train existing people to begin to understand the value of AI and data in smart manufacturing. We need to digitize our SME manufacturing ecosystem. Basically means we have smaller operations run by smaller people, but fast, efficient, using machine learning, and we can build multiple of these to create new jobs. And ultimately build local IoT and AI hubs that basically service agro-processing, textile, hardware manufacturing, oil and gas manufacturing, oil and gas product development. So
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. John Kamara, for the keynote address. I think we got the video, something happened with the video, and I think it got cut short. But that was super packed with lots of really, really great strategies on how we can actually be at the center of the fourth and the fifth industrial revolution. Mr. Kamara really unpacked lots of nuggets that we can definitely add to the blueprint of industrialization on the continent in the fourth and fifth industrial revolution movement. So thank you very much, Mr. John Kamara, for that. Later on in the event, we will have time for Q&As, questions and answers, because I'm sure some folks have questions regarding Mr. Kamara's speech and even the opening address by Ms. Umana. So we'll have time for questions and answers later on during the event. Once again, if you're joining, welcome. to the African Industrial Forum. This is a webinar type platform, just in case you're wondering where everybody is. Everybody's here, just that you're listing the speakers one at a time, or the speakers as they come to the stage. But we're excited to have you here at the African Industrial Forum as we make meaningful, intentional decisions about where the continent should be in terms of industrialization. We're soon going to move on to our panel discussion, but before we do that, just to again set the stage for the panel discussions that we're going to have, we just want to play a little video to give an overview of industrialization in Africa. It is definitely what you have already heard, but just to visualize it even more, to set the stage for the conversations that we're going to be having during our panel discussion. So please, let's watch this short about 3-4 minute video on the evolution of industrialization in Africa, and then we will get started with our panel discussion.
Africa, a continent of 55 nations. Over Africa, a continent of 55 nations, over 1.4 billion people, with some of the world's richest natural resources. For centuries, it was seen as a source of raw materials. But now, Africa is writing a new chapter, industrializing on its own terms. During colonial rule, Africa's economies were structured around extraction. Gold, oil, cotton, cocoa, shipped out raw, processed elsewhere, and sold back at a profit. Local industry was discouraged, and infrastructure was built to serve external markets, not local development. After independence, many African nations dreamed of industrial sovereignty. National development plans emerged, factories were built, but progress was uneven due to various barriers. Africa is enormous, about 20% of the world's people and land, yet it produces only a sliver of the world's industrial output. Our current industrial statistics tell a stark story. Across Africa, manufacturing is roughly 10.4% of GDP, and only about 7 to 8% of African workers are in factories. Merely 1% of global manufactured exports come from Africa. Most of our exports are still raw minerals and agricultural commodities. Africa accounts for about 3% of world GDP and only 2% of global manufacturing value added. Today, Africa is undergoing a quiet transformation. New industries are rising in textiles, automotive, agribusiness, pharmaceuticals, and digital technology. Countries like Ethiopia have become hubs for apparel. Rwanda is assembling smartphones. And Nigeria is leading Africa's fintech revolution. It's not just about factories, it's about knowledge, innovation, and sustainability. In 2021, Africa launched one of the world's largest free trade areas, the African Continental Free Trade Area. It aims to unlock intra-African trade, build cross-border value chains, and create a single industrial market worth trillions. Goods are now moving more freely between African countries. Farmers are exporting produce, and engineers are working on multinational projects. Africa is on the path to industrialization, though energy shortages, skills gaps, and infrastructure challenges persist. But with the world's youngest population, digital leapfrogging, and a renewed focus on value addition, Africa holds immense promise. Africa's industrialization isn't just about machines and markets. It's about dignity, jobs, sustainability, green industrialization, sovereignty, and a future built by Africans for Africans. The journey is underway.
And I think the stage has now been set for our panel conversation and our panel discussion. We have heard a lot about the evolution of industrialization on the continent, we have taken a look at some data that underpin the conversation that we'll have today around how Africa can come together to really be center stage and leaders in the fourth and fifth industrial revolution. It gives me great pleasure to welcome some of our panelists that are here today. And like I mentioned earlier on, we'll definitely have opportunities for folks in the audience to make comments, ask questions, and also speak, because I know we have quite a lot of experts that are joining us also at this forum, and they're in the audience. I would like to introduce our first panelist. And our first panelist is Dr. Edem Wonyor. And I'm going to read his bio now. So Dr. Edem Wonyor is a pioneering engineer, inventor, and AI researcher with a passion for ethical innovation and global impact. He currently leads the non-extractive data AI research team at Google Research in New York in the USA, where he collaborates with indigenous communities worldwide on data sovereignty, natural language processing, and ethical AI development. Dr. Edem Wonyor holds a PhD in electrical and computer engineering from Georgia Institute of Technology and a minor in material science from the same university. Dr. Wonyor's research explored neural networks for data storage in smart materials. He also holds degrees from the University of North Carolina, Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology, and also a certificate in AI data analytics from Harvard Business School. With over 14 patents, applications, and 5 granted US innovations and inventions, Dr. Wonyor is an accomplished innovator whose work has been published in respected journals. He has taught engineering at Georgia Institute of Technology and North Carolina University, and has contributed to global solutions with organizations like the World Food Programme. Dr. Wonyor is also the founder of Kidnovate, a global empowering initiative for children across the world, encouraging children to harness innovation and creativity. He's a certified PMP and also a PMP ACP professional, and he continues to drive impactful, ethical, inclusive technology and societal transformation. He has worked for IBM, Intel, name any of the top Silicon Valley companies that you know of. Dr. Edem Wonyor has contributed to remarkable innovations in the Silicon Valley and globally. So please, let's put our hands together for Dr. Edem Wonyor. Our next panelist is Ms. Ene Machem. And Ms. Ene Machem is a seasoned professional in sustainable energy and development, with a strong focus of advancing energy access and infrastructure across Africa. She currently serves as the head of global partnerships at Deutsche Gesellschaft for International, short form GIZ, that's what we all call it, GIZ. So she's the head of global partnerships for GIZ, and she's based in Frankfurt in Germany. In this role, Ms. Machem leads international collaborations and strategic alliances to drive impactful energy and development initiatives globally, currently focusing on Africa and Latin America. Over the years, Ms. Machem has held key leadership roles within GIZ, including Africa Partnerships Energy Coordinator, Head of Component for Solar Electrification and Market Development, Head of Component of Social Infrastructure and Energizing Development in Ethiopia. Her work has centered on promoting renewable energy technologies, building sustainable energy markets, and developing public-private partnerships to support inclusive growth. With expertise in policy development, energy efficiency codes, and sustainable construction, she has contributed to shaping frameworks that enhance energy access and resilience, particularly in underserved communities. Ms. Matcham is recognized for her commitment to fostering sustainable change through collaborative action, strategic thinking, and innovation in development of policy and practice. Her career reflects a deep passion for driving energy equity and supporting Africa's transition to a greener, more sustainable future. So please join me in welcoming Ms. Ene Matcham. And so for today, we're going to have our two panelists start us off with some interesting conversations. From just listening to their backgrounds, you can see the reason why they are key and important to being here. Dr. Wonyor has expertise in AI and smart manufacturing and the digital ecosystem. And Ms. Matcham has expertise on energy, which is really, really important, and infrastructure development, which is really important in supporting industrialization. Most of the times what we hear when we're talking to folks about industrialization is, where's the electricity, where's the energy, where's the infrastructure and policies? And so it gives me great honor to invite to the stage. Please, panelists, if you could turn on your cameras and invite Ms. Ene Matcham and Dr. Wonyor to the stage. Okay, Ms. Matcham, please, your video. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Margaret.
Yes, welcome, Dr. Wonyor. I'm just waiting for Ms. Matcham.
For some reason, I can't turn my video. It shows like it's blocked.
Oh, okay. Oops, sorry about that. Let's see. But I think probably we can hear you. So if your video can't be turned, okay, now it's turned on. Perfect. Okay, great.
Okay.
Yeah, now we see you. Thank you very much, Ms. Matcham.
Thank you too.
Okay. So I've read your amazing bios, super impressive work that you all do on the continent and globally. But would just like to give you an opportunity just to self-introduce yourselves to our attendees, of course, contextualizing your introduction of the work you do around the topic for today's forum. So we can start with Dr. Wonyor, just introducing yourself with the context behind the topic of today's forum, and then we'll go to Ms. Matcham.
Thank you very much, Professor Itua. This is a great forum, and thank you for all the efforts that you and your team put together in getting this started. I think this is a very important forum. And I say this because Africa holds a very important place in the world. However, we'll be talking briefly about the challenges faced by Africa and what these challenges actually pose to the continent itself and the world at large, if nothing is done. So basically, my work involves working with indigenous communities around the world. I'm an AI researcher, as Professor Itua said, and I've been working primarily with communities on all continents. And my aim is to see how these continents can actually be part of this AI revolution and the AI age. As you've seen in the past, there have been many economic revolutions, such as the Industrial Revolution, and then it came to the AI, it came to the internet age, where all those actually had peculiar economic opportunities that emanated to the various regions or people who participated in those. But one thing that has happened over the years is that Africa missed out on a few of those. For example, if you talk about the Industrial Revolution, because of the capital-intensive nature of that, Africa was not able to participate in that. And that, coupled with the colonial forces that were on the continent at the time, the plans were not actually there to really equip the continent with the technological know-how and resources to be able to really participate fully in the Industrial Revolution. And then we went to the age of the internet. The time of the internet, if you look at when the internet revolution started, you know, that produced a lot of billionaires, right? You can actually count people who made money, billions, out of the internet startups, the various internet startups that you can think of. Now we have another revolution, which is the AI age. The question that I keep on asking is, will Africa benefit from this? Or will Africa still be left behind? And there are a couple of things that Africa needs to do. I'll be talking about some of this. So let me hand over the baton to Ms. Macham to continue from here, and then we'll come to some of these details that I touch on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Wanyur, for that introduction, and again, setting the stage for additional conversations to follow. So, Ms. Macham, please, if you could just introduce yourself and just talk a bit about some of the work you've done in the sector that supports industrialization, and then we'll delve into the questions proper.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me here. And it's an absolute pleasure for me to be part of the Forum on Africa Industrialization. Yeah, for me, it's really a great opportunity to speak on such a subject that means a lot for the continent overall. Again, as you've mentioned, I'm Ene Macham, and I have been working in the energy sector for over 10 years now, working for the German International Corporation, a lot in Africa, and then also now increasingly in Latin America. And maybe to start by saying we cannot talk about industrialization without energy. So I think it's clear, right? I mean, to drive industrialization, you need access to energy. Now, the African situation is actually in a, I would say, unfortunate situation, considering that this is data that has been going round and round, but over 600 million people do not have access to electricity. And we know what this means in terms of industrialization. The question is, how do we move from this data that keeps on being referred to, and how do we ensure that we close the energy access gap as soon as possible so that we are really a strong part of industrialization? How do we do that? And this is where my work comes into play, where I support through the GIZ, the countries that we're working in Africa to create enabling environment for renewable energy and energy efficiency investments. So basically looking at what kinds of policies, what kinds of regulations needs to be in place to attract investment into the clean energy sector. And here I focus on the clean energy sector, and basically seeing how best to do that, considering then the urgency of the situation. So over I think 10 years now, I've been working in Nigeria, then in Ethiopia, and now in Germany, but supporting Africa, a lot of African countries, for example, Namibia, Mozambique, Eswatini, Lesotho, Congo, Brazzaville, and several other countries there, to see how to really create this enabling framework to ensure that investments come into the clean energy sector. And of course, you would see from the African continent, you would see a huge challenge there in terms of in the past, Dr. Adam mentioned also a bit of the issues or the history. In the past, there's been a huge reliance on the African continent on fossil fuel, coal. Also, I mean, hydro is not fossil fuel, but also a lot of reliance on also hydro, on coal, and all of this. But at the same time, we have seen a lot of population growth. And what we are seeing is that as the population grows, we have investments in the energy sector that has been done many years ago, but the public sector do not have the capacity, the finance to be able to basically improve on this infrastructure that has been done in the past. So we are really relying on outdated technologies. We are really relying on power plants that have basically really at the end of life, right? And so it needs a lot of investment to build new generation infrastructure. But that's just one part of the puzzle. Looking at energy generation, we also need to understand what does this mean in terms of transmission, energy transmission. How do you move this energy from one place to another? And in that case, also research has shown that while investment is growing in generation, it is not in proportion to the investments that is needed when it comes to electricity transmission. So what you see is you could have a lot of energy generation, but you are not able to move this electricity from point A to point B. So that's now double the problem, because transmission infrastructure needs a lot, much more investments in terms of finance than generation. Now, what we are seeing again is that the public sector cannot invest into this because, there's no money from the public sector side. So the question is, what does this mean? How do we then bring in private financing here, right? And in order to do this, you basically have to look at how your laws, how your regulations, how your policies enable private sector investment to come. And this is also where my role has been in trying to really see how the public sector and the private sector can come together and really invest in the energy infrastructure needed for the industrialization that we talk about today. And I think I would end it here now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Macham, for that introduction and just giving us a holistic view of all the work you do across the continent and really, really emphasizing the importance of energy infrastructure for industrialization to occur. Without energy, there's no industrialization. So the work you do is really, really critical. And so thank you for that introduction. We're going to now move on to the questions that we have for our panelists, just again piggybacking off of their introductions. So first for you, Mr. Dr. Wanyur, just wondering what sectors show the most promise for scalable AI adoption in African context?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the question. So there are many areas that AI can impact on the African continent. AI can be used in different areas. So from education to exploration to different areas. Health is one key area. But once again, as Ms. Macham was saying, energy remains a bane for the continent. Everywhere you go, energy is a big problem. So I have been advocating for a sort of an energy pool, a sub-regional energy pool. So for example, we have ECOWAS and we have the East African Community. So these places, they have a need to come together and create energy sources that can be used by the member communities. Because the backbone of AI is energy. Energy is, the AI infrastructure actually sits on energy. So if there is no energy, we are going to start having issues like this. And one thing I say is that the AI age is a very important one. one thing also that we need to look at as a people, the various government, is they need to look at the cost of data. Because one thing is, if you look at how much one megabyte of data is on the African continent, you compare that to other countries, how much 1 megabyte of data is, you realize that the cost relative to the minimum wage in many African countries is extremely high, right? So it actually becomes a barrier for people to really participate in the AI economy. There are many very intelligent, smart Africans there who actually have plans to really create very interesting applications based on AI. But some of them I've spoken to, they find it very difficult to really do this work because of the cost of the internet. So these are things that we need regulators on the African continent to take a look at. One thing is also the quality of the internet on its own. I mean, some time back, I was in Ghana. I was back home in Ghana, and I was supposed to be working from home. I mean, it's a few years ago. And I bought supposedly the best internet package available. And if we were actually having this conversation, if I were doing this during that time, it was very laggy. Nobody could hear me. My team that was based in the US could not hear me. So these are some of the issues that we need to address. But I see a lot of potential, because one thing is, if you look at the entry into the AI industry, is very low. All that you need is a laptop, which is very cheap, or you can even do a lot of this on your phone, right? And if you look at the phone penetration in Africa, is pretty high, right? But we need to actually tie these loose ends as a people in order to make these opportunities available for us to be able to compete on the world stage against all the other countries out there.
Thank you, Dr. Won. Your really important points highlighted there. Just the cost of data on the continent, it is cost prohibitive to really support small, medium enterprises in really adopting Industry 4.0. So on top of energy, we also need to look into internet access. I know that here in the US, we are kind of moving to saying internet access is a basic human right. It should be like air, it should be like water. And so it's a basic human right that everyone should have internet access. And so that is a very, very important point highlighted there, that on top of the conundrum of energy access, we also need to face internet access if we need to move towards Industry 4.0 and Industry 5.0, which is heavily driven by data. And if other countries can do it, then we can definitely do it also on the continent. Ms. Macham, just wondering from your conversation or from the points you highlighted earlier on, I know you did talk a bit about the importance of energy access for industrialization. Could you please highlight what the key barriers are that are preventing manufacturers, in particular folks interested in industrialization, from transitioning to sustainable energy sources? Because as we think of industrialization on the continent, we want to be intentional to learn from mistakes of other countries that have industrialized but did not industrialize in a green manner. And so the industrialization produced a lot of pollution and resulted in high carbon footprints. So what are the barriers, in your opinion, that are preventing manufacturers or African industrialization individuals from transitioning to sustainable energy resources. And if you could give any examples of one that you've seen that has worked on the continent.
Thank you so much, Prof. Maybe I will just highlight two things from my perspective. I think there are several other topics or barriers, but maybe from my side to bring two aspects here. One is regulation. If you would want people to transition into renewable energy sources, then you have to look at the regulation. You have to make it enabling. You have to create enabling frameworks that allows this transition. And maybe just to underpin why this is important, I think in the past, and if you look at the history of Africa, we have typically been more or less one market system, in a sense that the utilities, the power utilities, were mainly responsible for generation, right? And this means that they build the power plants themselves, and they are able to then distribute it to then potential or clients or to the citizens. But increasingly, like we have mentioned, with the role of public sector financing really decreasing and private sector coming in, the question is then what kinds of models now make sense, and how does the regulation deal with such models? So we are now seeing a lot of opportunities where countries are beginning to then look at their electricity sector and allowing private players to come in. And for example, if you look at Namibia, where we have a regulation on called the modified single buyer regulation, that basically allows private sector come into the market and is able to at least meet the needs of large consumers of electricity, I think for up to 30% of the market. So this means a regulation enabled that. Yeah. And in this case also, then the regulation is not only tied to, I think the ambition for Namibia was to really diversify so that they are not reliant on other countries like South Africa that has typically also supported a lot in providing their electricity access. So they are really looking at being sufficient when it comes to electricity and looking at other sources of electricity generation. And this is where also renewable energy comes into play. Now, their regulation allows private sector players to come into the market and be able to also supply electricity to large consumers, and at the same time the potential to also trade on the Southern African power pool, right? So it means that you're securing basically off-takers for this electricity supply. So this is very crucial. And for me, it's important that different countries start to look at the models that have worked in the past, when it is mainly the utilities as the core players when it comes to electricity generation and transmission and distribution. And now that you are having private sector come in, how do you change your regulation to ensure that it's conducive for them to make their investments either in generation, in transmission, or distribution? So one key barrier is regulation, and the regulation needs to address the needs of the country at that moment and enable private sector players come in. Secondly, it's also the cost of capital. We still have a high cost of capital. There's a lot of argument in terms of whether this is being driven by the high perception of risk on the continent, and what does this mean for the cost of capital. But it's still the reality that to make such investment, the cost of capital is huge. And we've been depending a lot on international financing, not domestic capital. And if you would see that countries like South Africa is probably the only country more or less in sub-Saharan Africa that has really managed to really push the electricity sector forward using domestic capital. And you can also see that they are well advanced in terms of private sector participation in generation, and now even taking concrete steps when it comes to transmission. So there's a lot to learn from there. Of course, there are also a lot to learn in terms of how not to do things. But I would say in terms of the barriers, the cost of capital, and then how do you start to enable domestic financing in the country? Because for me, if you want to borrow and you borrow in foreign currency, and we see what is happening in a lot of the countries, you see what this means for Africa. So it's not sustainable to rely on international financing. We have to try to see how we can unlock domestic finance. So I would just focus on two things: regulation and cost of capital, as well as some of the issues surrounding the cost of capital. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Macham. That was really packed. And just hearing that the key barriers, in your opinion, of course, you mentioned that we've got a plethora of barriers, but the two that you think we need to really focus on the continent as of now are regulatory frameworks to really create inroads for the adoption of sustainable energy sources and sustainable energy infrastructure for industrialization, that we do not really have any enabling regulations or regulatory frameworks or enabling models on the continent by and large that really encourage inroads for sustainable energy adaptation for manufacturers and folks interested in industrialization, and also highlighting that the high cost of capital and the fact that our capital is very reliant on international capital, and we need to really pivot more towards domestic capital. And thank you for the examples you gave. South Africa, from your example, seems to have quite a resilient model for domestic capital investment into sustainable energy. And then you also mentioned Namibia with your modified single buyer model, which seems to work for Namibia and has helped them to achieve or move towards achieving sustainable energy independence. So really great thoughts there from your field of work. I know this is what you do day in, day out, supporting the continent to adopt sustainable energy infrastructure. So really great to hear this, and I hope our stakeholders here, everyone is taking note. The way forward for Africa, so to speak, is really getting more private sector funding, getting better public-private partnerships around sustainable energy, because we do not want to be like other continents that have adopted industrialization at the cost of its people, at the cost of the planet. We want to move towards green industrialization. So thank you very much, Ms. Macham, for those comments. Dr. Wanyo, just wondering, in your field of work, you travel the world. I know the other day you were in Japan, traveling all over the world to see how different indigenous communities can adopt AI. AI is part and parcel of our world today. It's part and parcel of Industry 4.0 and Industry 5.0. And of course, we don't want Africa to be left behind. So just wondering, in your opinion, how do you think, despite all the barriers that we've all highlighted, how do you think African manufacturers and industrialization individuals can strategically leverage Industry 4.0 technologies such as AI, IoT, and robotics to enhance our global competitiveness without exacerbating the existing digital divide? We know the digital divide exists, etc., and all the issues we've highlighted. But what are the proactive steps? How do you think, what are like the practicals you can give stakeholders here to let us know how we can adopt AI, overcoming all those barriers, adopt Industry 4.0 and IoT in our systems?
Thank you. Thank you, Prof. So adopting Industry 4.0 is very important. And as you mentioned, it's important to really do this in tandem with our way of life. I've been saying that it looks like we have lost our way of life. You can be an African and you can be an AI engineer or AI founder. You can, whatever you want to call yourself. So I was in Japan. Recently, and you can see that they still hold on to their traditions. traditions that are based on respect, traditions that are based on treating people well. Those things are fundamental to every African community that have been around the world, from east to west, from north to south. But I've seen that those traditions of ours are getting depleted because we say that we are now in the modern world. And, being in Japan, I saw how they were able to marry their traditions successfully with their way of life and as well as the modern age. Japan is a developed country, but I was really amazed at how they still keep on to their traditions of respect. And those who are familiar with the Japanese management systems, you see that they actually build some of those things into those management systems, right? It's very important. And you can see that they actually operate with consensus. They have people actually bringing different ideas, and then they come together and see what is the best way to march forward. There is this African proverb that says that if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together, right? And that is where the consensus is. So it's a very important African proverb. And it really shows. So that's why this saying that goes that it takes a village. You can see that we actually had that kind of knowledge, how we actually move forward as a people. But it looks like we have this individualistic aspect that is creeping into our ways of life. So if you look at Industry 4.0 coming to that, I will say that this is something that I have been advocating for various African communities to come together to really pool resources. So for example, take CERN, which is CERN, is actually based on the European community coming together, pooling resources. Different countries, France, Great Britain before, Germany, others, all coming together to build these centers where there is research work that is done. They bring people from different countries, all collaborating, because the problems that are for Europeans are very similar. If you go to Germany, you go to France, the problems are very similar. Just likewise, if you go to Nigeria, you go to Botswana, you go to Ghana, Liberia, the problems are very, very similar, right? So is it possible to really have, for example, we have the African Union. What is the scientific arm of the African Union doing in this regard? Are they engaging experts who are here and everywhere else to really see how best they can draw policies that will enable Africa to participate in this new age? Or are we going to let this new age pass? I read a report by the World Bank, and that says that by 2030, just 5 years from now, 80%, so 8 out of 10 of the world's poor will be in the African region if nothing is done. So this is a very serious statistic that our policymakers across the continent needs to look at. 8 out of 10 of the world's poor will be based in Africa. And what's the meaning of this? The meaning is that there are a lot of baggages that are carried, that are brought as a result of having so many poor people on the African continent. One, terrorism. Because once people are poor and desperate, they don't have any hope then they can easily be convinced to join these terrorist organizations. Then number two, look at what's been happening. There are many Africans who walk many miles to cross the river, the ocean, to get to Europe. They are risking their lives. You are going to have a lot of these issues. So migration is going to be a very big issue. So the International Migration Organization and others need to what? To partner with African countries to really stem these statistics. This is, I call it a sort of a prophecy that is there that we need to what? We need to really stop from happening, right? And the actions are very important. So collaborating with one another across the continent, really bringing people together, having those African organizations across the continent really working to see how they can actually provide these means for the people. And then one thing I've seen is that when you go to the schools, the various schools, some of the schools don't even have access to computers, let alone the internet. You know, I've donated a lot of computers to many schools around the world, especially within the indigenous communities. They lack a lot of resources. And I was even surprised, you know, even though we are talking about Africa, even when you go to indigenous communities in the US, you can see the lack of resources that they have. But for Africa, we have a lot that we need to do. And one thing that we need to look at is also our resources. We have a lot of resources in Africa. Look at lithium, right? So if you talk of energy, Ms. Macham was talking about energy. We have a lot of lithium on the continent. Are we going to allow the resources to be carted in the raw form, or are we going to really partner with investors to build facilities that can process this lithium into very high values? And then also, can we build power plants that can be used for some of this, right? But one thing that I also see is that we need to what? Have very good regulators, right? Because if you look at the quality of service, I've always been hammering about this. I was on a panel recently, and I was talking about it. The quality of service for the internet is extremely bad across the continent. So what can we do about this? So this is my point. So we can only get to that destination by really having the right policies by all governments across the continent. And I'm glad that, Prof, you are leading this revolution. And I believe that the next stage from here is how can we engage governments? Can we engage governments and really provide training to them? Can we talk to them? Can we present some of these statistics to some of this government? Because I believe some of the governments are not privy to some of these statistics, right? And these are security issues that I've talked about. So how can we work with these governments to ensure that we bring about this Industry 4.0, which has a very high dependence on AI? Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Warren. There's a lot packed in all the things that you have said. Really standing out for me is just that there needs to be intentionality on the continent around creating scientific research, technology, innovation platforms that are collaborative across the continent instead of having things in silos. I know the other day I was having a conversation with a colleague about, does Africa have an equivalent of the National Science Foundation, which the US has, which really supports tech revolutions, the Googles of this world, the Apples of this world were funded by the National Science Foundation. And so do we on the continent have that sort of entity that can really catalyze and support the sort of innovation that you're talking about that is needed around in Industry 4.0? What is the scientific arm for the African Union, and what are the work that we're doing? And so lots and lots of great things to unpack there. Thank you. As we start to wrap up from the scripted question, or from this segment of questions, and move into the open discussions, just had two more questions. Ms. Matcham, just thinking about big, bold visions, what would a future-ready African industrial ecosystem look like by 2040? I know we like 2030, but like it's just 5 years away. Okay, so let's give ourselves a little bit more time and talk about 2040. In your opinion, what would that future-ready African industrial ecosystem look like? And what bold actions must governments and private sector take today to get there? I know Dr. Wanyo talked about, hey, we really need to get governments involved. So in your opinion, what bold actions must government and private sector take today for us to get to an African-ready industrial ecosystem? We would love to see it by 2030, Africa leading the way, but even if by 2040, what bold actions do you think needs to be in place?
Thank you so much, Prof. I would, from my perspective, say that we already have a bold vision, right? I'm not sure how many people on the call are aware, but we have the African Single Electricity Market and the Continental Master Plan, AFSEM/CMP. And the goal of the African Single Electricity Market and the Continental Master Plan is to really integrate national, regional power systems by 2040. So to have one bold and broad electricity market by 2040. And basically, this would mean, I think currently we, on the continent, we have about over 200 gigawatts, and the aim is then to have over 1,000 gigawatts by 2040. And I think it needs an investment from the vision. It needs an investment of over 1.29 trillion US dollars. So there's a bold ambition from the African Union, from ATII, to see a well interconnected electricity market by 2040. And for me, if this happens, this is a sound basis for industrialization, because we are basically saying we have an interconnected, integrated electricity market that basically enables different countries trade power amongst themselves. So basically, when one country has a deficiency, does not have enough power, they are able to buy from another, and you are able to then basically rely on each other's resources to be able to power the industrialization that you need. This is a bold vision. The investment needed is, I mean, it's really huge. And from what I know, because we support, my project also supports that vision, working with the African Union and also ATII to see how to bring AFSEM CMP to life by 2040. There's going to be a lot of engagement with the private sector, because the Continental Master Plan basically outlines several generation projects and several transmission projects that needs to be in place for us to achieve that vision. So there's a need for private sector investment into this. And I would say it's not really my vision. It's the vision of the continent. It's not mine. And it's a vision for all of us, yeah, to really rally behind, to see how can we support this bold vision of the African Union, of ATII, to see a well-connected electricity market. Now, what this does is basically also aggregates demand and supply across the entire continent and tries to see how best to match demand and supply. And this would basically be a game changer on the continent when it comes to electricity access and generally energy. So I would see, for me, one core message is that we have governments, national governments, that we have regional institutions rallying around, working together to see how to bring ASEM CMP to life. Now, that brings me to a second point on what Dr. Womuyo was saying in terms of really the collaboration needed. I think there are a few things I was noting when he spoke about the collaborating with one another to enable Africa to participate in this new age. And when I look at the vision of the African single electricity market and the Continental Master Plan, it can't be done without this collaboration. Because what we're basically saying is that we have national plans, so for example, integrated resource planning, that enables us to meet the energy demand from a national perspective. But then we have regional planning, so basically we have power pools. For example, the Southern African Power Pool, that basically is a platform where different utilities are part of and are able to then trade electricity amongst members of this Southern African Power Pool. This also exists in the Eastern African Power Pool. This also exists in the Western African Power Pool, the Central African. So these different power pools would basically, first of all, see how they can work together in the region to be able to do electricity trading and all of that. And then the ambition is then to combine these different power pools to make it one full electricity market. This cannot be done without collaboration. Maybe just to emphasize how we have enabled these kinds of collaboration, and I will give two examples, speaking to regulation and also speaking to procurement. And why did I say regulation? I think a lot of us have spoken to the importance of regulation to enable industrialization. And what we tried to do, and it's currently running, is we bring together, we call it the peer review and learning network. So basically, we bring together energy regulators, like CEOs of energy regulators of a few countries. So starting from 6 countries, and we bring them together to basically share best practice when it comes to electricity regulation, drawing from the African Development Bank ERI, which is the Electricity Regulatory Index that basically measures the performance of energy regulators on the continent. And we try to see how can these regulators exchange ideas, basically what has worked in your country, what has failed in my country, and really at eye level. So that's why we call it the pair. So it is among peers, right? You sit together and you basically say, okay, how do you maybe work on how is your mini grid regulation? How is your regulation on distributed generation, for example? And you basically share this experience. But what we do is, for example, they visit Ghana. Ghana is the host country in 1 year. And basically, you visit Ghana with regulators from the other countries, the other 5 countries. And basically, you look at the regulations in Ghana, looking at it from how is the governance of the electricity sector set up in your country? How do you set regulations in your country? And what is the impact of the regulation in your country? Now, we speak to several players. So, for example, speaking to utilities, speaking to regulators in that country, speaking to private sector players in that country, civil society, just to understand how is your electricity sector functioning. And at the end, we spend 1 week, or they spend 1 week. And at the end of this week, they are able to basically make recommendations to the minister to say, at the end of this week, we spoke to this and this and this. We understood this is how your sector is currently set up, and we see that this works really well, and we see that there's a need for improvement here. Now, this does not come from internationals. It comes from peers. And it does magic in the room when your peer says, no, in my own country, we managed to have cost reflective tariffs, which you would see on the continent. We have just 1 or 2 countries, for example, like Namibia or Uganda, with cost reflective tariffs. Several other countries, over, let's say, 40 or 50, do not have cost reflective tariffs. And this is one of the core reasons why the utilities are bankrupt, why the utilities are not able to really invest again in their power generation or transmission. So now you're having countries to say, no, in Uganda, for example, this is how we do it. This is how we ensure that our regulation works. We do not have interference from the government when it comes to this and this decision. And then you see others saying, oh, really? How can I do this in my own country? So that exchange enables a lot of change. And we have seen that sometimes after the 1 week and the recommendations, certain decisions that have been pending for months and years just quickly move, because it came from their peers. I'm just trying to emphasize the need for this sharing, this collaboration, not only looking at North-South, but really South-South. There's a lot we can learn from each other. There's a lot we can do together if we are really open with one another, share experiences, and see how we can grow jointly towards the Africa that we want to see by 2063. I would end here, I think, because we're running out of time, right?
Yeah, thank you so much, Ms. Macham, for all the amazing, inspiring information you gave. I say inspiring because it's inspiring to see that we actually have an electrification master plan for the continent, and that the African Union has taken intentional steps, strategic steps to ensure that Africa is not left behind when it comes to energy infrastructure that will support and is critical in supporting industrialization on the continent. And just piggybacking off what Dr. Wonyo had said, and you re-emphasized it, that we cannot continue to work in silos. We must build bridges across the continent. We must collaborate, and exciting to hear about the power pool that is already at play among several African countries, which your work at GIZ also supports, and also you highlighting one of the items, or one of the Achilles heels, so to speak, that causes utilities to go bankrupt is not having cost-reflective tariffs. Uganda and Namibia, from the work you do, seems to have figured out efficient and effective cost-reflective tariffs, and that's why their utilities, the energy utilities, seem to be working. And I think lots of lessons for us to take away from these conversations to really get back to the drawing board, to create that blueprint that will really support industrialization on the continent. But in some segments, we are having those big, bold, visionary type actions and master plans that are in place. And that is really exciting to hear that. And yes, I know we are soon running out of time. We will end at the top of the hour, but thank you so much for that. Dr. Wonyo, I know you have maybe a slide to share, but also just summarizing this. I know some of the work that you do is also supporting youth and workforce and skill development. You're really passionate about that. You created Keynote, founded that outside of your work in the Silicon Valley and in the US. So question for you is this. In the face of automation and AI, how can African economies ensure that job creation while preparing the workforce for roles that don't exist? So how can we really intentionally, and what examples have you seen, or what have you done? But really, what would you say we need to do to ensure that we have a workforce that is ready for jobs that don't even exist right now? And the changes in jobs description is accelerating at the speed of light with the advent of AI and automation.
Yes, thank you, Prof. I will say that this is a very important point for Africa. I've been saying that Africa has contributed a lot to the world in terms of technology. For example, vaccination actually comes from Africa. I was telling people, when you go to the rural areas, I mean, when you have a snake bite, they are able to use the venom from the snake, and they will cut part of your skin and put it in there, right? So these are some of the contributions that Africa has made to the world. If you talk about even semiconductor technology, the making of chips actually came from Africa. I mean, etching is something that was used in ancient Egypt for a lot of these processes. And so looking at how to create an ecosystem of jobs for various people, especially the youth, right? Because the population is growing at a very high rate. So if we do not create these jobs that are available, then some of the vices that I mentioned earlier, those things are going to creep in, because they say that the devil finds work for idle hands, right? So we need to really put into place the strategies. And as Ms. Marcham said, we cannot operate in silos. We need to really see how we can learn from each other. So can the youth ministry in Nigeria partner with the youth ministry in Ghana to see what are the learnings that they can use? You know, one other thing that I see in this age is that, is it possible to break those artificial barriers that we have? You know, that this is the boundary of Nigeria, this is the boundary of Togo, this is the boundary of Botswana, this is the boundary of Morocco, right? Can we break those boundaries and really let people start collaborating across, right? Can we have students from the University of Nsukka, is it Nsukka? Yes, University of Nsukka in Nigeria, collaborating with people from the University of Morocco, and then seeing, can these people come together, and can there be any funds that can be available to tap into, right? Where students can actually see, can we come out with this idea? Can there be some sort of hackathons? Can there be some business hackathons where, you know, we'll have ideas that will come from these students, and then based on how they perform, we have panels that will actually judge these ideas, and there should be some funds that will go towards providing some means for these groups of people to really create the next startups, right? That will be the multi-trillion-dollar companies, right, in the world. That will actually change the course of history. That will help humans wherever they are. So these are some of the big ideas that I've been thinking about, especially working with the youth, right? How can we ensure that this youth, they have the requisite resources to really be successful? And one thing that I've also been talking about is it possible for individuals to sponsor some of these things, right? We have a lot of foundations like Tony, is it how do you, the last name is Emelu in Nigeria? Yes, so we have some of these people who have a lot of funds. Is it possible to approach them to sponsor some of these ideas, right? So these big ideas that can come from the continent. Tony Elumelu, yes, thank you. Foundation, right? We have a lot of this, right? So is it possible for us to do this, right? They have a lot of funds that are there. So they are now part of this solution on the continent. So it's not only left to the governments alone. And then also in addition, when you talk about the various resources that you have on the continent, is it possible to really open some of this to investors who are from Africa, right? You have a lot of people in the diaspora. Can these people come together and really buy certain mines? You have lithium mines, you have those. Can there be pools of people who can contribute to this, right? And then one thing we need to look at is the environment. We need to ensure that we take care of the environment, because these are actually some of the bases that the African society is built on. You know, so when you go to many African countries, there are some groves. Those groves are reserved because they want the population of fauna and other related parts of nature to really thrive in those areas, right? So can we ensure that we actually partner with indigenous communities on the continent to ensure that we protect these land masses? There is a lot of distraction that has been taking place on the African continent as a result of mining activities. Can we just ensure that we work with the the teams to ensure that we stem some of this distraction that is ongoing. One thing I want to say in the interest of time, because I know we don't have a lot of time, is that technology is now the new oil. So there is an article, very interesting article that was published by The Economist magazine a few years ago, and that says that data is the new oil. Data is the new oil. So currently, if you look at the top companies with the highest market capitalization, you see that most of these are actually companies that are based on data and not oil, right? So it's really important for Africa to really think strategically how to really get a large portion of this new oil, which is data. And there is this quote from one Ghanaian philosopher, Dr. Kwejiri Agri, that says that fly, eagle, fly. So this here is saying that he came out with. He said that there was an eagle that was hatched by a hen chicken, among chicken. And in this area, the eagle started growing with the chicken. But when it got to a certain time, it saw that it could actually fly higher when it's playing with the other chicks, right? Because it knew that it's an eagle. So one thing I say is that Africa, when we look at our past, we see that we are actually that eagle, and we've been able to fly very high. We created a civilization on which the entire world is based, right? So is it possible for us to really know who we are and what we are built with, and know that we are this proverbial eagle and we should be able to fly higher? And I see that in the youth that I talk to, they actually have that propensity to fly, but can we put the wind under their wings so that they'll be able to fly higher? This is a question that I'll leave with everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Warren. You're again inspiring, calling us to take bold actions in supporting the youth, to ensure that we have a workforce that is ready for the fourth and fifth industrial revolution. And just even highlighting the importance, like Ms. Sene had already mentioned, of not working in silos. In the US, there's the Fulbright Scholars Program. Can Africa have its own version of Fulbright Scholars Program, where scholars go around countries and research and work together? Important for us to really support the next generation, the youth who are our future, to ensure that the data that you had given earlier on, that the World Bank projects that by 2030, 8 out of 10 poor people will be from Africa. We do not want that. And so we need to push for data. We need to push for data-driven jobs, or jobs in those ecosystems, which Industry 4.0 and Industry 5.0 are key to. So thank you very much for that, and that we're eagles, our youth are eagles, and we should be the wind beneath their wings. Thank you so much, our panelists. Let's put our hands together for panelists. Great discussions, lots of wisdom, lots of key takeaways that we can take away and just really start putting together that needed blueprint for industrialization for the continent, and also good key takeaways for stakeholders here present to take and start informing the work that we do across the continent. Now, this is time for open questions and forum. If people have questions, please put your questions in the chat, or you can raise your hand if you have a comment, and we will bring you to the stage to make a few comments. I know that in the audience we have a really prominent individual in workforce development globally here in the US. He's Nigerian. or African, because here we are talking about Africans, and I will bring him up to the stage shortly to just say a few words about youth development too. But it's been great just having Africans across sector. You see, Dr. Wanyo is from Ghana. That's why we had to tell him about Tony Elumelu's foundation. But just having Africans together in the same room, in the same platform, having these rich conversations about the continent holistically as one and not in silos. And yes, if we want to go far, we need to go together. We cannot do this alone. And so, yes, I see some questions coming up, but before we answer the question, I will just bring Chief Jacob O'Rourke up to the stage to just give us 3-minute comments on youth workforce development in the 4th and 5th Industrial Revolution with AI, just about 3 minutes, and then we will start answering some of the questions. I know we'll not have time to answer all your questions, but please keep putting them in the chat and we will curate feedback in the email that we send out to all attendees today. So let's, Chief Jacobs O'Rourke is here. Okay. So, Chief Jacob O'Rourke, please, do you have your comments you wanted to make about youth workforce and skills development?
Yeah, thank you very much, and good morning from South. Yeah, I am pleased to be part of this discussion. I am looking at all the people, and I've been listening for some time, and I see the great knowledge and the wealth of materials that we have been exposed to. My name is Jacob O'Rourke. I am the author of Groundwork of Skill Acquisition and Development. I've been working with youth here in America and also in Africa. I am particularly excited because we have come to see that Africa itself, stands at a unique crossroad today with a rapidly growing population. And if we must continue to be, that platform that we want to achieve, if we have to follow what is happening in what has happened in the 4th and the 5th industrial revolution, we must actually get ourselves aligned. If you look at that book, you will see what we have been able to establish in terms of skill acquisition and development. For us to join this, we have to be able to see how can we train our youths across Africa on this particular subject of skill transfer, skill development, and what it takes. Africans are very skillful people. If you look at us from when we started as a small community to where we are today, we have to think about establishing something like Pan-African skill qualification framework. This skill qualification framework will be established across Africa. We want an Africa whereby when you are qualified in Nigeria, Ghana can employ you. They can testify about what you have, such that we will not need to cut across borders to see where it is better, because you are in Nigeria, Calabar in particular, and you have been open to this qualification platform, which and you are qualified. Somebody in Koforodua or Kosovo in Ghana should know that this is a true certification because it is accepted across Africa. Imagine here in America. America has 51 states. I can decide with my qualification, I can decide to move from California to New York. I can stay in California and apply for a job in New York, and I will have it. And I can also move. I can even work from home. Do we have the infrastructure to work from home in Nigeria? I have tried to work with people in Nigeria, students in Nigeria, youths in Nigeria, the epileptic power system would not allow it. So somebody mentioned, I like Dr. Edem. He mentioned so many different things. I like the other ladies also who mentioned about power distribution. This is where our problem is. We talk about Internet of Things. Do we consider the cost of internet to a common person in Nigeria, to a common person in Ghana, to a common person in Ethiopia and other places of Africa, other cities of Africa? We need to create regional centers of excellence for skill training, whereby these regional centers are in every part of Africa, whereby this youth of Africa can have reduced training costs. We attach so much importance to education, which is very, very good. Academic degrees are very, very good. But I tell you, in America here, most people that make the most money are tradesmen. If your house is flooded this morning or late in the night about 3 a.m. and you want a tradesman to come in and dry it up, you pay real good for it. And you have people who are stationed 24 hours and waiting for such situations. We have to adopt what we call competence-based training and certification across Africa. We have to leverage digital learning platforms and e-learning. That is almost everywhere, but we have to strengthen it by providing the platform, the enabling ground across Africa. We have to strengthen public-private partnership, PPP, so that we don't leave all these things to only government and politicians, just like it is here in America and other countries. We have to develop continental skill mobility framework and also a continuous monitoring, evaluation, and feedback mechanism that will allow us to see, are these things working? And it has to be done across Africa if we want to help Africa to succeed. We have to go back to our drawing board. And that is why I am very, very happy. I'm very passionate about this particular forum, because it now gives us a voice to speak to all industrial stakeholders to understand where we are coming from. And here I would like to stop. Thank you very much for allowing me to air my views. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much, Chief Jacob Orox, for those comments. Again, really, really hammering on the importance of a Pan-African framework for skill development, which is really critical for the fourth and fifth industrial revolution and for African revolution. Thank you so much. We're honored by your presence here. Thank you, sir. Okay, we are coming to the end, close to the end of our time. I think there was a question. I crave your indulgence to just extend for maybe 5 more minutes. We'll end at 5 minutes past the hour. So there was a question in the chat. Would any of the speakers want to take that question? It says, if you had to choose one priority for the next 5 years to accelerate industrial growth in Africa, what would that be? And Dr. Wanya, Ms. Macham, or Ms. Emam, want to quickly take that? Yep.
Okay, thank you, Prof. So the question is, if you want to accelerate.
If you want to accelerate, if you had to choose one priority for the next 5 years to accelerate industrial growth in Africa, what would it be? So what would your one priority be for the next 5 years?
So one priority that I will look at for the next 5 years, as you all heard from all the panelists and also from Chief Orox, it's the infrastructure. So as you realize, someone who is trying to work on the internet, the person is not able to do it because, one, there is no power. Number two, there is no data, or if the data is even available, or the internet, the quality of service is so poor the lag is just so long that you can't really have any meaningful communication, right? So I will focus on the infrastructure development, and with the infrastructure comes with policy, right? So it means that we need to be talking to the various policymakers to ensure that we have the right policies in place and the regulators are actually working to improve this infrastructure. One thing that I can see that is done very well in the US is you have the FTC, you have the FCC as well, which is the Communication Commission, the Federal Communication Commission. If your quality of service as an internet service provider or maybe a phone service provider is bad, you are going to be charged millions of dollars, and that those dollars will be actually be used to improve the services, right? So therefore, the penalty is something that prevents the service providers from reneging on their duty of making the service better for all. So that's one area that I'll work on. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Wonyor, for that. Again, infrastructure, that's what we've heard, infrastructure. And it's been great having you and Ms. Mercham here to just talk about infrastructure. And I would also add youth development, so that once our infrastructure is ready, we've got our youth, our workforce ready to really hop in there to get the job done. Thank you so much, all our panelists. And now just moving on to closing, I want to say a very, very big thank you to everyone that made our time to join our inaugural African Industrial Forum Summit to talk about industrialization on the continent. There has been a lot that we have heard from our panelists, from our speakers about the way forward for industrialization. At African Technology and Innovation Institute, we will be stitching all this together and presenting a white paper on this. Because like I had said earlier on, this is not about talk and talk. This is action. This is a movement. We want to really see that plan that Ms. Mercham had talked about fully implemented, the dreams of Dr. Wonyor and Chief O'Rourke's all, and UNIDO all fully implemented. I want to say a very big thank you to all our speakers, Ms. Emem from UNIDO. Thank you very much for being here, and greetings to Ambassador Philbert Johnson. I want to say thank you to John Kamara, to Dr. Wonyor, to Ms. Mercham and Chief O'Rourke and the other speakers that contributed to just the conversations here. And thank you to the staff of African Technology and Innovation Institute for putting this event together. Also, big thank you to all our partners, the partners with African Technology and Innovation Institute. Thank you very much. I know we have representatives from the Manufacturing Association of Nigeria and the Pan-African Manufacturing Association, or the Manufacturing Association of Africa here represented. We have other dignitaries here, commissioners and government and policy stakeholders present in the audience. So thank you very much to all our academic partners. We say thank you. So look out for information from African Technology and Innovation Institutes, and connect with us for additional events, and look out for an invitation for the next African Industrial Forum. We're here to make a change. We are here to support Africa in being leaders in Industry 4.0 and Industry 5.0 and participating in the technology leapfrog. So thank you so much, everyone, and have a wonderful rest of your day. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to reach out to us, and you can also complete the form that we have put in the chat, or follow us on our social media for additional information. Thank you, and let's continue to move the continent forward. Let's be proud Africans and proud friends of Africa and move the continent forward. Thank you, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Prof.
Thank
For the-
you.
and thank you, everyone.
Thank you.